Hey there, welcome to your positive energy recharge. I am Jade Sterling, your women's health coach, nurse, counsellor, yoga therapist. I bundle all of my skills and experience into the work I do to help you balance your hormones, master your emotions, and create a life you love. And the topic of today, the title for this video is Perimenopause and Power. And this is something that I have been particularly thinking about over the last week because I've been seeing so much content out there that I feel is so disempowering to women in general, but also for women who are perimenopause and going through the process of menopause itself. So these are actually also lots of thoughts that I have had over a period of time that are only new for me to start to express them. I'm really documenting my journey at the moment as I go forth to share my message that it is possible for perimenopausal women to really step into their power, to have balanced hormones, to be able to manage their emotions, to actually use their emotions as tools to evolve and step into the most amazing version of themselves that they didn't even know was possible. And finally, to create a life that you love along with that, using those tools. And so the more that I talk about it, the more that I'm documenting my own journey, the more that I'm realizing that it's becoming quite clear to me that it's all about empowerment for women. But how? It's the application of empowerment. We can get inspired. We can go, yeah, women are awesome. And yeah, we need to do these things. And yeah, we have so much power within us. But then it's like, how do we apply that in a man's world? Because I know I get a lot of kickback from throwing that phrase out. But we do live in a man's world. It's the world that we live in. I'm not saying that we need to change it, but it's good to actually look at it because there is a possibility to change, either within the construct of what we already live in or creating something new if we want to. This is a big topic, and you'll see in my Tuesday chats, I'm starting to bring people on to have a chat about how we can support our biology with the psychology and then using that information to actually advance our consciousness. This is big stuff, and I've just started out as a women's health nurse who wanted to help women manage their hormones. But here we are, and so I think it's worth sharing these thoughts and feelings and concepts with you. There's really, I suppose, 4 things I want to talk about today when it comes to perimenopause and power. The first thing that I want to address is the quote. I say the quote, it's really more the concept, I suppose, that I've been hearing over and over again in the last week in different forms of short form content or long form videos and education resources, which is just blowing me away. And of course, then there's my social friends who are sharing this information as well, because this is really the consciousness, and it's I feel like it's like the unspoken accepted status of where things are for women and perimenopause and menopause. But this one sentence that every time I hear it, I just feel bubbles from my toes all the way up to the top of my head. If you've watched any of my videos about processing your emotions, bubbles is my way to describe it at the moment so that I can actually feel what I'm going through and help to really look at that and possibly dissolve it and then be able to use the process to then find solutions to what I obviously think is a problem. The sentence is, if a man had the symptoms that perimenopausal women have, we wouldn't have the problems that we have, and medical science would be at the forefront of finding solutions. That's basically it. If a man had the problem that women have, we wouldn't have the problem. That to me, I feel it in my throat, is the most disempowering perspective that you could ever possibly imagine. It is the absolute epitome of the damsel in distress. Like, we're trying to be feminists, but we're actually saying the man is not saving me. The establishment is not addressing my needs, regardless of whether you can prove that that is true. The thought, and I'm going to get more into that, obviously, but that thought is so disempowering and it absolutely renders us powerless. And when you're powerless, your nervous system feels unsafe. And the thinking part of your brain, which is where the blood flow normally lies, moves to the back, and your brain's only job is to keep you safe, to protect you and to defend you to the end. It's not looking for solutions to your problems. So if we render ourselves completely powerless, we are not going to be able to find solutions. And we are rendering ourselves as such by giving an external expectation to someone else to come and save us. And I feel that that is the biggest problem that we are facing. It is a disease within the society, a disease within women. And I feel so strongly about this, and that I actually had lots of conversations this week when I felt like it was really coming to the surface and I needed to talk about it. But one of my clients did say to me, Jade, I am a damsel in distress. I don't want to be, but I'm in distress. I'm like, I can understand that. I'm in the same boat. I'm having lots of physical experiences that are affecting my emotional health and well-being. I'm nearly 47 years old. And so a couple of weeks now, I'll be turning 47. And so I'm in the throngs of it myself. But I've chosen, and this is actually part of the last point, which I'll come back to, I have made a decision of how I want my experience to be. We're going to get to that. So you can be distressed. I can completely understand being distressed. And that doesn't mean ignoring the biology. That doesn't mean ignoring medical science, but getting angry at it and rendering yourself powerless is 100% not helpful. That's the first point that I want to make. The second point that I want to make is that we need to actually embrace our own unique biology. Now, I still do a lot of counseling with breastfeeding women and breastfeeding mums who are trying to do the best that they can for their babies. They're not all 100% exclusively breastfeeding. Most of them are, and they want to keep it that way. But a lot of women now particularly are doing mixed feeding, and they're trying to figure out how they're able to have the best of both worlds. And I still do counsel lots of women who are not, but my specialty is in breastfeeding, in the way of counseling and helping women stay connected to their breastfeeding journey and their goal of being able to provide the best possible outcome for their babies. Not judging anyone who makes different decisions, but that's my role as a counsellor. Now, as a counsellor, it's different to a coach. I've discussed this before. When you're a coach, you're actually looking at the best case scenario, and you're looking at how can we make whatever's happening for you, how can we optimize, how can we, and I've talked about it before, like your house is burning down, where we're in counseling mode, it's crisis mode, and your house is on fire. That's my analogy of the house is on fire. You're in crisis mode. You need to get yourself to a place of safety. And then when you're in a place of safety, then we look to coaching to be able to figure out what we're going to do with the ashes as a result of the fire. And so when dealing with breastfeeding mums, when we're actually dealing with fires, quite often we have to look at the individual situation. Now, there are blanket statements that are made. There are health professionals that, I am one of them, we're all doing the best that we can, but we do have charts, and we do have scales, and we do have guidelines, and we do have recommendations, and we actually do have things that we look at, particularly, for example, for babies in the first 2 months after the first week of life. We want 5 wet nappies in a whole 24 hours. That's a whole day and a whole night. 5 wet nappies and at least 3 poos in 24 hours, because that shows us that the baby's hydrated and the baby is getting what the baby needs. That is something that is quantifiable. That's something that research has done, that we're able to say, we're able to look at that, we're able to understand, and we're able to see if we're on track. And that is the guideline that we're looking for. That's something that, as I said though, can still be depending on the baby. If we don't have that, we don't have that information, we've got to look at the options to be able to get us to that particular goal. But the only way you're actually going to move forward and find solutions is if you dial down your nervous system so the blood flow stays at the front of the brain and you can think and your mind is open to finding solutions. So while we do have to look at hormones, we do have to look at different functions and systems of the body, I really feel that the nervous system is the central motherboard. The brain is the central motherboard for keeping these systems and keeping these functions and actually enabling us to move forward and have general overall optimal health. Now, I was going a few different directions there, but with the breastfeeding mums particularly, we have to look at what's happening individually for the baby. Because another benchmark, for example, is when a baby is 12 months old. Up to from 0 to 12 months old, we say that babies need to have breast milk first or formula milk first, but it has to be nutritional milk, either provided by the mother's breast or a formula that has been safely approved and is on the shelves of approved supermarkets or places where you can buy them. So for the first 12 months, milk first, food second. Okay, then for the next 12 months and beyond, it's food first, and then milk second. Milk is just an added extra bonus, like super multivitamin or like probiotic or extra goodness that will still definitely give you health benefits for sure, but food becomes the primary source of nutrition. I will exhale here. I get very excited, obviously, about health and nutrition for mums and babies. But it doesn't work that when you get to, if your baby's 11 months old and your baby's now eating so much food and drinking such less milk, and your baby, you're like, oh, I've got one more day or I've got one more week until my baby's 12 months old. It doesn't actually work that way because every baby is different. Every mum-baby combination is different. And so your baby might be eating food and drinking milk. It might be the other way around. And if you've only got a couple weeks to go, some people are like, no, I've got to stick to the guidelines. I've got to get to exactly their first birthday before I make any changes. But sometimes things will take their own course of nature and things happen. We just have guidelines so we have something to, as a goalpost, to be able to say, well, that's an idea. You know, if a mother called me at 9 or 10 months and she said, my baby's eating so much food and drinking less milk, I'm like, well, see if you can still keep it the other way around. See if you can still make sure you offer the breast first and then offer the food second. And we still try and keep people on track, but at the same time, we can't force nature into going where we want to go. And also, it's not going to happen exactly as the research says. At 12 months old, that switch is just going to flick. It's absolutely ridiculous. I know babies who sit up at 6 months old, and that is the general expectation that when your baby's 6 months old, they're going to sit up. But some babies sit up at 5 months old. Some babies sit up at 8 months old. Same with the talking, same with the walking. We've got guidelines. We know roughly when it's going to happen developmentally, but we've got no real knowledge of being able to know exactly when that corn kernel is going to pop. I saw that beautiful analogy online the other day about children are just like corn kernels. They just pop at their own rates and they pop when they're ready and all at different rates. And we can't expect them to all pop at the same time. Some don't actually pop. It's how we think about that. So the point that I'm trying to make, because the same is when it comes to women's health. Women are little corn kernels that are popping on the inside at different rates. The hormones are going to be shifting and changing uniquely, individually, and we can't actually take one woman and say, this is how it's going to work for you. And you know why they don't do a lot of medical research on women and their biology? Because of the changeability, because of the unpredictability, because women aren't consistent on the inside when it comes to their biology. You know how frustrating that is to science that needs to prove things and measure things and actually come up with conclusions for things? We can't conclude, we can't measure, we can't be certain because things are always changing. So we need to get very specific about our own unique biology. We need to understand how our own cycles work, how our own hormones work. And this can be done just by ourselves without the need for seeking a healthcare professional. There is so much information out there online. Yes, you do need to know what is a reputable source and what is not, but it is a process of finding someone that you trust. There are random people on the internet that really are trustworthy, that are trying to guide you in the right direction. And you know what I say to mothers more than anything? They've actually done a lot of scientific research too on women's intuition. And not a lot of conclusive stuff, a lot of conceptual stuff that's worth looking at later on down the track, and we can maybe measure things in smaller quantities. But they have found that even women who have got no knowledge or previous experience in a certain medical area, they have actually made decisions based on how they feel about it. They've been able to create the best possible outcome. Now that can be grey as well, because a lot of the time women are saying to me, I don't actually know how I feel. And that is because feelings come from our thoughts, and we have roughly 60,000 thoughts a day. It is going to be so hard to be able to really process all the emotions that come with all the thoughts that are coming. So it's completely understandable that you don't know how you feel. And this is why I do the work I do, to dial down the nervous system, to be able to slow it down so you can become aware of even some of those thoughts, to actually become aware of how those are feeling in your body, then to feel your feeling, process your feeling, and from that place is when we can actually change, or not necessarily change, but make conscious choices about our behaviors and how we're going to move forward and find solutions. The other thing is too with that is that I often say to women, when we're still having trouble processing the nervous system and dialing it down and recognizing the interpretations of what we're having in the outside world, it's more about, can you recognize what doesn't feel good? That I found for me really powerful. People would say to me, this is right. Oh no, this is right. Oh no, that's right. Oh no, this is right. And listen to me, I've got all the answers. And I'm sure everyone was right for their particular cause, for their particular situation, possibly for their circumstance. But I didn't know if that was right for me. But what I did know was when it felt wrong, and I would move away from that. For example, again, we can go back to babies, I suppose. I was told to put my baby in a separate room when I came home from the hospital, and that was the right thing to do, because otherwise they get reliant on you and then you won't sleep because you hear them cry. And there's lots. This is a contentious issue. I don't want to go off on another tangent there. But when I got home and had a separate room for my baby, and I went to go to bed that first night I got home, it didn't feel like the right thing to do on the inside. And my husband was like, but is it the right thing to move them in? I don't know if that's the right thing. And I was like, I don't know either, but I know that it doesn't feel like the right thing to do to leave him out there. So I brought him in, and then it was a process of figuring out from there what worked. Was it better in the bassinet? Was it better in the bed? Was it better to create some kind of co-sleeping arrangement or have him on the other side of the room? That was a process in itself to then go, okay, well, that didn't feel right. So where do we go to from there? And I found that that has been helpful for women. Sometimes they've been offered advice about either taking some medication or some hormone replacement therapy, or even some counselling instead of hormone replacement therapy. And they're like, I just don't know if it's the right thing to do. And I'm like, does it feel like it's the wrong thing to do? Does it actually feel like it's not the right thing to do? Does that make sense? Just having that different perspective. You don't have to know if it's the right thing, but you can figure out for yourself if it's not the right thing for you, because you can feel it on the inside. Things that don't feel good, you just move away from that, and it takes you closer to the things that will feel good and places where you will find solutions. Because when you're feeling better, go back to the video about how to feel better. We're dialing down our nervous system to access that place in our brain where we can find solutions. So it really is about embracing our own biology, embracing our own journey, and recognizing that each woman is 100% unique in their own way. That's not overwhelming, that's good news. Your journey can't be compared to everyone else, but other people still have solutions for you. It's about dialing down and then being able to find what works for you. Move away from what doesn't feel good. That's the first step. The other thing that I just wanted to say about that too is that I don't know if anybody else remembers the old days of when I first started menstruating when I was 12 actually. And my mum gave me a diary and she said, write it down. Write down the day you start to bleed. Write down how many days it goes for. Write down how you feel each day. And then at the end of the day, and then the end, you write down the date that it finished. And then you'll know how many days, you'll know how you're feeling, and you'll know the duration. And I did that for 10 years. I kept a notebook from at least, I remember being in my 20s and moving out of home and still having a notebook where I was documenting when my period started, how I was feeling during the days of my cycle, and then of the bleed, and then the day that it finished. And I had that in my consciousness for 10 years, at least, until I started to then not need it. For the next 10 years, I didn't document it in my notebook as such until I got a phone. And then now I've started documenting it in my phone because I had that revelation that my experience, there's a pattern here for me. And my sister, who was also given a notepad and pen, I don't actually know if she continued on with it. And she probably didn't, to be honest. But we would have conversations about our experiences at the times that we were menstruating. And I remember the clarity that I had and the certainty that even when I was feeling terrible, I knew that seemed to be a pattern. So I was documenting my own patterns. And because I was just becoming aware of them, it didn't create a negative experience. It didn't even create a positive experience. Just the experience of awareness made me realize that it was my experience and no one else's. And it became more neutral. It became more objective. It became just something that was. There were certain times where I was like, I don't necessarily want that to be that way anymore. For example, like I really wanted chocolate. And I started to learn that sugar wasn't good at that time. Didn't know why, so I kept eating chocolate until it was one of those things where I was just like, okay, day 3, I want chocolate. Became day 2, became day 1, became the day before. And I was just like, now I'm eating chocolate 4 days into my menstrual cycle. And I could see by documenting it how it wasn't really serving me. I was having definitely bigger peaks and troughs in my mood and eating more and more chocolate. I still have a chocolate addiction. You might have learnt that about me by now, but this is an ongoing thing that actually I use as a tool for personal development. That's a whole other story and a whole other video. But the point is that through the process and then learning through medical science the benefits of what I discovered as a diet that worked for me, I'm not going to talk about that today, it's also another topic for another day, but the diet that worked for me, I was able to modify and come up with a better outcome for myself. It's being so self-aware. Now we have lots of apps now on phones and lots of tools and resources online that we can help us to be able to track where we're at, what we're thinking, how we're feeling. There's some great programs out there. Health and fitness are doing the same thing because they've realized that there's a correlation. But keeping in mind that this is your journey only and nobody else's but yours. Become aware of it first and foremost and embrace the fact that it's unique and unique to you. That is the second point. I've just got 2 more points to make, which really quite aren't as big. But the second point really is about shifting the mindset in empowering how we think. And so the model that I use is a compass that when women feel lost in their thoughts and feelings and emotions and just lost in the process of their life, then I have a compass that I show them with a map so that you never get lost again. You have your way, and it is a tool for exactly how to operate the equipment. This is the brain, and the map is the application of that to be able to empower yourself. First of all, just step back, take a look at it, write down everything to be able to gain perspective and awareness. You might actually want to keep your experiences, but then some of them you might want to change. So we use the map to establish where we are, and then we use the map to establish where we want to go. Now, it's our thoughts primarily that you'll hear me talking about that actually, when you have a thought and you believe it, it releases chemicals into your bloodstream, and that creates emotion in your body. And those emotions tell your body what to do. Now, you'll see me using the words feelings and emotions interchangeably. There will be another video where I actually separate those two, because there is a slight, subtle difference between the two and how they biologically manifest in the body. But you can generally use the words feelings and emotions interchangeably, particularly for this topic that I'm talking about at the moment. And when we have that, a feeling, it tells our body what to do. And that becomes the experience of how we show up in the world. So it's being able to recognize that the thoughts that we're having, but I'm finding now that thought work is not new. It's been something that's been around for a really long time. And my own experience was of it because I grew up with, a mum who was at the forefront of the new age when it came to thought leaders like Deepak Chopra, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer. These are some of the first books I read. Thoughts create your reality. It's not a new concept, but the concept that made the difference and the change for me, and what I mainly teach people, is that your thoughts are just an interpretation of what's actually happening outside of you. And what's happening outside of you is usually something that you can't control. So the power to interpret and choose a thought actually gives you the power to choose how you want to feel about it. And that's when we're dealing with circumstances that are happening in the outside world. So that is particularly when we're looking at medical science and the establishment and the structure and of society, social constructs, to be able to define what's happening for finding solutions for women in perimenopause. But when it comes to actually looking from the inside, that's a different story, and that is where we have to go. And this is where a lot of women say to me, but Jade, that's the point. I can't control what's happening on the inside either. I couldn't control what's happening on the outside, and I've started to get a handle of that. This is one client that I had recently. But now I can't control what's happening on the inside. I can't predict how I'm going to react and respond. And so now I have uncertainty on the inside and the outside, and that's the scary thing, right? And I so know I've totally been there. But we are still making interpretations with our thoughts that certain things that are happening, it shouldn't be that way. It's not right. Things are not working out the way they're supposed to. All of these thoughts are the interpretations that are creating the feelings that are contributing to the roller coaster ride of emotions that we are experiencing. And our hormones are 100% inextricably linked with that part of our nervous system. So I do believe we still have to go back to what's happening on the inside, dial down the nervous system to be able to access solutions, which we can do just simply by recognizing that we're making interpretations of the outside world with our thoughts. And is that serving us? Can we actually think about it a different way? Because that's how we're going to change things on a bigger level. And that really leads me to my last point, is about making a decision. Really, it's about making a decision that what is your perimenopausal journey going to be like? And if you go back to my Hormones and You video, I think it was, where I discuss that hormones are like an orchestra. And the orchestra plays from the moment we start to menstruate when we're young women, and it plays all the way through our lives until we reach perimenopause and the members of the orchestra start to leave, and it gets quieter and things start to feel different because there's a change of vibration, because the music is different. There's a change of, there's chemical things happening in the body that are creating physical, biological changes. But how can we support ourselves psychologically with what's happening with us biologically? Because ultimately the symphony is supposed to die down and the music is supposed to go away. And I had one woman who said to me, "Oh my God, that's the most depressing thing I've ever heard, that my music is supposed to die." And I'm like, you could look at it that way. That's an interpretation. Your music doesn't die. The orchestra members leave one at a time as I call it the vibrato, which is the ego, starts to fade and gets more and more silent, particularly for women. Yes, their hormones are supposed to be dialing down at the same time their nervous system's dialed down. And this doesn't happen in today's day and age, which is where the discord comes from. See previous videos. But the vibrato of the woman, a woman experiences through her orchestra a certain amount of wisdom and light and understanding that we then need the vibrato to dissipate and the ego to soften. And through finding the silence and the stillness within is where the true wisdom comes forward. It's where women don't become invisible. It's where women step into their power, but they don't do it loudly. They do it silently. They do it silently and consciously, where they're able to then move into being the teachers and the leaders and the inspirational movers and shakers for the next generation. This is not a time where your music dies. This is a time when your music settles into a place of stillness and gets channeled in a completely different way. And this is actually a completely different consciousness that at times is at discord with the consciousness of the doing, productivity, busyness of a male-dominated world, a masculine-driven world. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. We have to be aware of it. We have to make conscious changes. But the way that women are going to do that is by not proving that they're as good as men and they can do everything that a man can do, which is all feminism has done so far. We need to pull back. And I'm going to make a bit of a bold statement here. It's my belief that women need to be back in the home, to be able to have the opportunity to go within, change the consciousness from within. Because my map will show you that when you can get clear about how you're interpreting things and the thoughts that you're having about things that are happening inside or outside of yourself, it will change how you feel, and then your feelings will tell your body what to do. We need a whole generation of women who are able to go within, to create new programming of what's happening on the inside before we then go and do what we need to do, because what we actually need to do we can't quite even comprehend yet. I have a few thoughts that I'm still not quite ready to share, but the future we just can't even predict because we don't know, we don't have any idea as to how and what it's going to look like. And so things won't actually be different if we just keep doing the same things over and over again. We need to go within. We need to change the programming before we then go out to try and make changes in the world. So we need to decide. That's the final point. Decide. Is perimenopause going to be your portal to a whole new dimension of yourself and quite possibly a whole new dimension of the way that we can be in society, with each other, in relationship with the world? Or is perimenopause going to be hard and difficult for you because everyone else is not doing enough to help you? It's really a decision that you have to make. This has been a big one. Thanks so much for sticking here through to the end. And just remember to own your path and create your peace. It's the only way. It's the only way for women. It's the only way for men. It's the only way for women to teach men for the benefit of humankind. I hope you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next video.